We're doing week 13, and my job is the summarizer. For chapter 25, John Moore, at the age of 31, he had hairy cell leukemia, which is a rare and deadly cancer that fills the spleen with malignant blood cells until it's bulged like an overfilled inner tube. Moore's doctor referred him to Dr. David Gold, a prominent cancer researcher at UCLA, advising him to remove his spleen. Moore signed a consent form saying the hospital could dispose of any tissue for cremation. After the surgery, he moved to Seattle and continued his life as a an oyster salesman. Moore's cells were considered exceptional. Researchers around the world were working to develop a value for hepatitis B. And then chapter 26 is despite Deborah's fear, she continued her life. And she continued working and taking care of her kids. In 1980, years after divorcing Cheetah, Deborah met a new man. His name was James Pullum. He worked at a steel mill, and they married in 1982. Zachariah blamed his father for Henrietta's death. He hated him for leaving the children with Ethel, and he never forgave him. Zachariah volunteered for researchers in alcoholism to pay for a new job. None of the doctors knew they were doing research on Henrietta's son because he changed his name. Chapter 27, Henrietta, cancer case started, which was HPV insulated into DNA into the long arm of the 11th chromosome. By the early 90s, the little sample of Henrietta's cervix was put into the lab. And also, that same year, the scientists at Yale had used HeLa to discover that human cancer cells contain an enzyme called telomerase that rebuilds their telomeres. In chapter 28, the story of Henrietta's lax started to turn into a movie. Deborah and her family were all interviewed for it. For the first time, they got to know the real story of what actually happened to Henrietta. And then in chapter 29, Deborah, you find out how she met her husband. It was in July 9, 2000. Deborah finally calls Scoot and gives the story of her mom. Deborah stays at a B&B, and when Scoot sees Henrietta's records, Deborah loses it.
13. I'm going to read Deborah's here. It's a big deal because of the legislation cells. Supreme Court, California rule that the cells transfer into infinity were now product gold to women engineers. Eventually, it wasn't legal. Journalists to public medical information to give by source, but the doing without consent subject the family at asking additional questions for information, let them know. And from the beginning of publishing series without question. Sada loved with giving, she said, because she knew it sounds crazy, but they did not through them. And she said, I can line anything going through the mind. You know, how else they gonna explain it? The cell gonna grow like that. They're going to a lot of doctors. They're talking on different subjects, science field. Thursday, they're going to take it out on her father's and me to honor my mom name. So I know it's gonna be great concert.
HL chapter 25-29 Clever Questioner. Why Moore did sue the Golden Oakland companies? The reason he sued both of these companies is because they deceived him and using his body and research without consent. What is the name of Deborah's second husband and where they met for the first time? Her second husband's name is James, and they met at mechanic shop when Deborah brought her car for mechanic. Why Zachariah was letting the doctors to research on him? Because he had no place to live, and he was happy to be in the hospital for an bed to sleep. So forgot the food. What are the names of the virus that Henrietta was infected? When she was tested, she came positive. The name of that virus is called HPV, human papilloma virus. What is the name of the reporter who was making documentary on Henrietta and her family, and what broadcaster station was? The reporter name was Adam Cortes, and it was from bbcstation.com. And